right, we will call to order the June 17th, 2024 Historic Preservation Commission meeting. Kelly, would you please read the roll?
Kathy Octon.
Here.
Patrick Boyd.
Here.
Jean Hackbarth.
Here.
Alderperson Hansen.
Here.
Mark Reinhardt.
Here.
Jane Scholler.
Here.
All right, thank you. Item 2, approval of the minutes of the April 15th, 2024 Historic Preservation Commission meeting.
I move approval as printed.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion by Jean, seconded by Patrick, to approve the minutes as printed. Any corrections or other discussion? All right, if not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Item 3, public comments upon matters not on the agenda. Please note that comments made during the public comment period shall pertain only to matters under the jurisdiction of the Historic Preservation Commission. Is there anybody in the public who would like to speak on anything not on the agenda?
I would.
Okay, go ahead, Gene.
I just want to bring attention to an award that was received in late April by Definitely De Pere. Along with the city and all of those resources, the Wisconsin Main Street program made this award to the Sachs Holdings Company for their best facade rehab, over $25,000 for those buildings located within the 100 South Broadway district, historic district. I applaud them and totally agree that they deserved that award.
Agree.
Yes. Okay. I second that as well. Yes, it was a great renovation of those buildings. So thank you for sharing that, Gene.
Sure.
Any other public comments? I'll just add that we do have a new commissioner here. We're very excited to have Kathy on board.
Thank you.
Do you want to just say a few words about yourself, Kathy? And
Sure.
Okay.
I live in East De Pere. Grew up in De Pere on the west side on a farm outside of West De Pere. Attended West De Pere High School. My husband taught at the high school. We have our son and grandkids and daughter-in-law all involved in the east side. I served for quite some time on the Board of Review, the real estate taxes. Since then, when I retired, I volunteered over at Dickinson and Heritage, and we are quite active in our neighborhood.
good. Yep.
Las Vegas, Jonathan knows.
Yep.
It's a great community, and you can't say enough good about it. And the people in the general area in Brown County know it, and we just feel very, very fortunate to have this be where we ended up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're fortunate that is where you ended up, and that you're here now. So, yep. Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah.
Great to have you on board. So, all right. Item 4, discussion about Historic Preservation Commission basics related to the De Pere Historic Preservation Ordinance, historic designated properties, etc. Discussion by Jason Tisch, Certified Local Government Coordinator and Preservation Education Coordinator from the State Historic Preservation Office. I'll turn over to Peter first. Introduce this.
Sure. This is a presentation that was requested by you, the HPC, for us to bring our guest speaker in from Wisconsin Historical Society, to kind of give us a refresher for those of us who have been here for a number of years on how we can be a good plan commissioner and become better plan commissioners. I'm sorry, historic preservation commissioners. Forgetting which meeting I'm at tonight. And then for those of us who are new, probably help to educate us on things that maybe you weren't familiar with, on activities that our Historic Preservation Commission participates in, or activities that we have the ability to participate in that we just don't actively do at this moment. So for this part of the meeting, because it is more of a casual discussion, you kind of notice I'm sitting awkwardly at a table in the middle of the room, rather than being in my standard end of the room. We did this so that we could kind of sit down almost like conference style and have a more casual discussion to help encourage questions and answers back and forth. So at this part of the meeting, I would like to invite everyone to kind of take a seat at this table and then continue this agenda item from this table in the middle of the room.
Okay. Do it.
It's Jason who's getting the phone call the next day. So not to say that he knows everything, but he knows a heck of a lot more than I do. And Jason, I'll let you take it over.
Great, thank you, and thank you all for coming down to this table. It's I find this setup much more conducive to these discussions, which I do all over the state. We have 78 certified local governments, including De Pere. And I do this kind of thing regularly, and I've found that it is much more conducive to a good discussion to sit at a table like this rather than a panel that looks like you're at the council meeting. So thank you for humoring me in this. I printed out, just for our use tonight, 6 copies. I should have printed 7, it looks like. Sure. Of your ordinance, which hopefully you're all very familiar with, but we'll be referring to it a couple of times, so I usually print out a couple of copies. So my name is Jason Tisch.
Oh, thank you.
I am the coordinator of the Certified Local Government program at the State Historic Preservation Office, which is within the State Historical Society. Every state has a State Historic Preservation Office. We do a number of things. We manage the Certified Local Government program. We manage the Historic Tax Credit program, part of the Historic Tax Credit program. We are the Office of the State Archaeologist. We manage compliance with state statutes that local governments need to comply with. So we have a team for that, team for archaeology. We have an underwater archaeology team as well.
Yeah.
If you've heard about the canoes that
Recently.
have been found in Lake Monona, Madison, that was our team who discovered those and excavated 2 of them and are now studying that site. So that's our office. Okay, let's get right into it. As I said, I do these all over the state for a number of certified local governments. And what I do is I kind of look at the situation of the city that I'm going to, and I look at what kind of historic properties you have designated on the National Register, locally, your survey situation, when was your last survey, are you due for another survey, when you have gotten CLG grants to do different things. So De Pere was certified as a certified local government in the program in 2002. I'm going to pass some of these around as well. only have 6 of these as well. That is the certified local government agreement that the city entered into in 2002 with your mayor at the time and our office. So it's just for your information to kind of illuminate the relationship between the city and our office. So at that time, De Pere adopted an ordinance, a historic preservation ordinance, that's your chapter 38 that you all deal with, that meets the requirements of the certified local government program. And we'll talk about those requirements. You established a historic preservation commission. Presumably you had one prior to that. I don't know for sure.
Did not.
No? Gene says no.
No.
Were you on the board or on the HPC in 2002? Were you one of the
I
first?
believe I was. It's been a while.
It has been a while.
I think I was.
So your program has been going for 22 years.
Oh, they should get it.
And just running through the certified local government program really quickly. So the national, it's a program of the National Park Service. It's a federal program. The National Park Service initiated the program back in the mid 80s. So these are the National Park Service requirements. You have to adopt a local ordinance. You have to have a HPC. You have to enforce state and local historic preservation laws, which presumably you're doing. Most cities do that pretty well. You have to maintain a strategy for survey and inventory. That just means you have to keep your survey current. And I think your last survey was done in 2017, I believe. We'll get to that.
Yes.
And you have to provide for public participation, which your ordinance allows for, requires, so that's good. Each state can also add requirements to the ordinance depending on your state statutes and what your state historic preservation office wants to do. So these are the requirements that Wisconsin adds to this program. I won't read through those. The one that cities most get hung up on the most is that you can't have an opt-out provision and you can't require owner consent. They're two requirements that kind of come at it from different directions. When cities are looking at the CLG program for participation, this is what they always get hung up on. They're really hesitant to have what is essentially a zoning code that allows a commission to designate properties over the objection of an owner. And almost every city that I talk to has that comes up as an issue. And what I tell them is, this is essentially a zoning code. People buy property all the time without thinking twice about the zoning code. The zoning code does the same thing. It requires certain setbacks from the property line. It requires this and that kind of design standards that they have to apply, that have to be adhered to. So it's essentially a zoning code that is used judiciously in most cities. Well, I think we're going to talk a little more about that later. And the commission has to be quasi-judicial. So you are a quasi-judicial agency of the local government, which means you have the power by ordinance to make decisions that are legally binding. In order to overturn the decisions that this body makes, a property owner has to appeal that to the council, and that's provided for in your ordinance. So I did a little digging about what we know about De Pere, about historic places in De Pere. You have done surveys. There was something that happened in 1975. I'm not sure what it was because we don't have a lot of records about it. It was a long time ago, but there was some surveying going on in 1975. Sorry? Do you have any idea? I couldn't find anything. I could find nothing about a 75 survey, but there were a lot of properties that were surveyed in 1975.
I find references, but I don't. Sorry, I find references, but I don't think I've ever actually found a document that gives the illusion of being an intensive survey.
Yeah, we don't have a document either. We just have a lot of properties that were surveyed in 75.
The very first one that I'm aware of, a printed document, was 1980.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
do you have a digital copy of that you can share?
I don't have it with me. I have it at home.
That would be really good for us to have.
Okay.
Gene, I can make that in, just bring me the paper copy, and I can make it digital to put it into the city's record, and I'll get a copy over to Historic
Sure,
Society.
will do.
That'd be
Thanks,
fantastic.
Gene.
Then there was a survey done in 2001 and 2017. So in total, we have in our database 822 properties that have been documented in De Pere. And when I say documented, that just means that they meet very minimum requirements for the National Register. They appear to be 50 years old, and they have enough integrity that they would be recognizable to somebody who built that property or lived in that property. So we talk about historic integrity. That just means they have most of their original materials. They have their original design for the most part. So those properties are recorded as being surveyed. And yeah, Peter.
Sorry to interrupt. I don't know what the ground rules for the table are. I was gone during that part. By documented, you mean that they're identified, they're not actually designated?
They're not
correct?
designated,
Okay.
right? We call it surveyed. They survey them, and that just means that we take a picture, we know the address, and it goes into our database as comparables, right? So when there is a property that does kind of rise to the top of, say, the Prairie School type architecture, we've got a body of other Prairie School type of buildings to compare it to that are old enough and have enough integrity. So it's really mostly a body of comparables. You probably know this, in the National Register, De Pere has 13 individual properties and 9 historic districts. That's a lot. And what I didn't do is find the number of properties that these 9 historic districts include. I usually do that. I forgot to do that because that gives you a number of properties that are eligible for tax credits, state and federal tax credits. With 9 historic districts, and some of them are fairly large. Most of them are residential, I would assume.
Five
probably
of them are residential.
Sorry,
5 of them are residential.
5 are residential. Okay.
Yep.
To the best of my knowledge, within the city of De Pere at this time, there's 267 properties, including the districts and the individuals.
That sounds about right for 9 historic districts. Thanks for doing my homework, Gene.
Trying to help.
And I think you have 4 individual properties. That's what I found on your website.
On the local?
Locally designated.
Locally designated, correct.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds right. This group has actually made a page on our GIS map where
good.
they can be looked up very quickly. An individual can just click. The individual sites are color-coded red.
Yep.
So if you take your mouse and click on the red, it actually will open up a box and tell you about the property very simplistically, and then offer a link that takes you directly into the historic site.
Excellent.
And the
Good.
Wisconsin Historical Society site
Good.
about the property.
Good. I always encourage cities to do that for a couple of reasons. People who buy property really should know if there's a local designation on their property. Realtors need to know that. And also, state and federal agencies who are doing projects close to those properties need to be able to find out which properties have local designation, because they have responsibilities to identify and minimize impacts to National Register, but also local properties. So it's important for state and federal agencies to be able to find those as well. So good on De Pere for making that happen.
Yeah, especially for those of you that are new, because we created that before you came on board. If you stopped in the street and somebody asks you, "Is my house historic?" you can actually whip out your phone and go to that GIS map and tell them right then and there on your cell phone.
That's helpful.
And how do we know what we know about these properties? We talked about this already. In 1975, identified 74 properties. The survey in 2001, done by Tim Hegland, identified 538 properties. And the 2017 survey by Heritage Research identified 459. A lot of these 459 are probably many of these 538, so there's a lot of overlap here. A little bit about the CLG agreement. We did touch on that a bit already. But basically, it's an agreement between the City of De Pere and our office. And the city agrees to do all these things: enforce state and local laws, maintain a qualified historic preservation commission, you folks have that strategy for survey, ensure public participation, which is in your ordinance, review and comment on National Register nominations. When we have a National Register nomination come into our office for a property in De Pere, we send it to you, and we just ask for your comment on the property. Did the consultant get it right? Is there anything that they missed? We don't need you to edit it, for commas and capitalization and accuracy. We work with the consultant to do that. But if there's anything that we missed or anything the consultant missed glaringly, that you folks really don't think it's eligible for the National Register for some reason, or it's been demolished lately or something, that's an opportunity for you to comment to us. Administer your historic preservation ordinance, provide technical assistance and guidance to local government. We'll talk about that in a little bit as well. And assist with annual CLG reporting, which we'll talk about in a bit as well.
Jason, I have two, before we leave that page.
Sure.
I have two questions about the number 5, our ability to review and comment. I think we've only ever reviewed and commented once or twice in my 7 or 8 years here.
Oh, okay.
And it was when we were adding the historic district for St. Norbert College, because I think they kind of did that on their own. It wasn't a HPC triggered request, right?
Interesting.
They went ahead and did it on their own. So it came to us to say, hey, do you agree with this? But the directions to me were, I was new at it at the time, were really vague about what I needed to do. Even telling me to take it to my HPC. It was just a letter in the mail saying, do you agree? Has that procedure changed to kind of steer me into saying, hey, I need to respond versus I should respond versus don't worry about this letter?
In the last year, I and the National Register Coordinator in my office have written kind of a form letter that goes out with that provides what we think is clear instruction. But if you don't think it's clear instruction, if we're getting feedback that instruction is not clear, we need to know that.
Now, mind you, I'm talking about something that happened like 6 years ago, 6 or
Okay.
7 years ago. So I don't want to throw you under the bus on something
Sure.
that you've already fixed. I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
how that happens, it's maybe a little bit more clear now that we need to react to it.
Yep.
And that same thing happens for like somebody if they ran their individual house. We would get that too.
Yes,
provide
any property that's in De Pere, you'd get
anything and everything, whether it's a house, a district.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's good feedback to. You probably got something for the Sunset Circle District.
What's in Alloy?
Oh, is that an Alloway?
Yeah.
I always get De Pere and Alloway. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yes.
They're cool over there. They copied our zoning code, so they can't be that bad.
So now I want to focus on one of these, and that's number 8, administer the HP ordinance, which you folks are doing. So most of the rest of what we'll talk about has to do with your administration of the HP ordinance. Can you all hear me okay? Or do I need to? Okay. Okay, I like to think of the historic preservation ordinance. Every ordinance has about eight critical parts, and we're gonna talk through those. But there are 3 that are absolutely important, and I use the 3-legged stool analogy for these. And those 3 parts are the criteria for designation. And your ordinance has 5 criteria. They're very common. They're very much like a lot of other CLGs and a lot of other cities. A property must meet 1. And a nomination has to make the case that the property meets at least one of these. And we'll go through your criteria in a bit. They are based on the National Register of Historic Places criteria, which kind of set the standard back in 1966, and a lot of criteria for local programs largely lean on those National Register criteria. Another leg is the standards for alteration and construction. Again, what you folks administer when somebody comes in for a certificate of appropriateness for one of your 4 locally designated buildings. These do not apply to those 200 and some national register listed buildings. You don't have jurisdiction over those. But the standards that you apply to locally designated properties. And we'll look at those. Oops. And then the third leg of the stool is the commission. You folks, you're critically important to the whole preservation program that your ordinance sets up. So let's go a little deeper into those 8 critical parts of an ordinance. And you'll notice that those 3 most important ones, I put a little border on here to accentuate those. But we're going to talk through each one of these and talk about what it does for the ordinance and what it does for the program. So, purpose and intent. Purpose and intent section, and your ordinance starts right up front with a purpose and intent, as most ordinances do, as most ordinances should. Yours has several purposes, and these sections do 2 things. First of all, they explicitly address the state enabling legislation for this type of ordinance, and also the constitutionality, the U.S. constitutionality of such laws, because it's very particular, it's very specific. And the second thing it does is it serves as kind of a backstop, a justification for what you all do as the HPC. And we'll get into that a little bit as well. So let's actually take a look at De Pere's purpose and intent. Here's your 7 purposes. I won't read through them, but I highlighted some language in here that gets to the state enabling legislation. It talks about this policy that promotes the protection, enhancement, and perpetuation of improvements, sites of special character, and special architectural or historic interest or value is a public necessity and is required in the interest of health, prosperity, safety, welfare, and welfare of the people. That gets directly at the state enabling legislation, which says, for the purposes of promoting health, safety, and general welfare of the community. In order for this type of regulation, based on aesthetics, based on what property looks like, it has to be, according to the state enabling legislation, it has to be for the good of the community, right? Not for the good of anyone, not for the good of any agency, not just for some random purpose, but for the good of the community. That's how political subdivisions, cities, villages can have this type of ordinance. So it's really important for that purpose. And also U.S. case law and Supreme Court decisions have affirmed the power of local governments to regulate historic properties under their police powers. States and municipalities have what we call police powers. I'm not going to go into that if anyone's an attorney here. You may be familiar with that. But it's a special power that states and cities have. It's where the power to police comes from, and among other powers. But in all that case law and Supreme Court cases, the aim of such ordinances must be for the benefit of the community. There it is again, the benefit of the community. So it has to promote some good in the community. And so that's where some of this language in the purpose and intent comes from. All right, HPC, one of the critical legs of the stool. De Pere's ordinance creates the HPC in section 38-3. Presumably you're all very familiar with this. 38-3. All right, so De Pere's HPC, the composition is 7 members. You have 6?
We're short 1 member.
Okay, that's fine. That's up to you. They're appointed by the mayor. That's pretty typical. 1 alderperson, someone from the planning commission, a long-range planning committee, And 4 shall be, I think it says residents or citizens, competent and informed. Competent and informed in the historical, cultural, architectural and cultural traditions of the community.
That's not ours, actually.
Oh, is that not yours?
That's not us.
That didn't sound familiar. I just read yours this afternoon.
Yeah,
I must.
Yeah, Chapter 2, Article V,
Yeah.
Article 5.
Let's ignore that slide and look at the paper.
Yep.
Sorry about that. That must have been the previous one that I did. Okay, registered architect.
Which we do not have right
That's
now.
one member
That's one
we're
you're
short. We're close to having an architect back on staff. We're back on committee.
Would be good.
Historian.
That's Gene.
Gene,
Licensed real estate broker.
Kathy.
our newest member.
Oh, good.
You can close enough.
But you have the expertise of a.
25 years of practice, but I couldn't
Yeah.
tell you it's a-
What's important is that you bring that skill to the.
Yep.
If you're, whether or not you're licensed, that's up to you and how you want to interpret your ordinance.
Yeah, our city's understanding with Wisconsin Historical Society is that if we can't fill that chair with, as described, we fill with the best possible, and we felt that you are our best possible.
25 years of real estate experience.
I don't mean that in a
lot.
bad way. I mean, we didn't find any reason that you shouldn't
Thought
qualify.
of 3 things I could say, but none of them were good.
As soon as that came out of my mouth, I'm like, that sounds terrible.
Council member, I think that's you.
Me.
And other citizen members, which reside, one of which must reside in a historic district. So there's your commission. Ignore my slide. Let's go on to the next one. I'd like to throw this one in, just kind of a really quick 5-minute primer for running an effective HPC meeting. And I go through these pretty quickly. Hopefully, these are no surprise to you. So, number 1, don't be intimidating. Be welcoming. Part of that, and I don't want to be critical of how y'all run your meetings, but part of that is it's kind of intimidating to walk into a room when you've got 6 people sitting up on the dais, and sort of like the council. It's a little intimidating. I would say that this format, if you can do it, is much less intimidating for property owners to walk into. What you do with that is up to you. I don't care. It's your meeting. Don't be intimidated. I'm sorry. Well, let's go back to number 1 first. Don't be intimidating. Be welcoming to people when they come in. Welcome applicants as they arrive. Introduce everybody. I hope you go through introductions before the meeting. Do it roundtable style rather than a panel. Do everything that you can do to not be adversarial, confrontational, intimidating. And number 2, don't be intimidated. The HPC administers a local law that was adopted by your council, right? I mean, it has the power of your zoning code. It has the power of every other ordinance that De Pere has. The HPC is a quasi-judicial agency of the local government, created and empowered by adopted local law. You're not the pretty paint and gardens committee, right? You have standards.
Function.
You have criteria, you have standards, you have an ordinance to administer. Don't be steamrolled by property owners, or intimidated by other city agencies. You're a part of the process prescribed by local law, so don't be intimidated. Come prepared. That means everyone. Don't rely on the chair to study you have 4 landmarks, so you probably don't have a really busy schedule of certificates of appropriateness. I don't know, maybe you do. But when you do have COAs to review, do your homework. Come prepared. Don't rely on the chair to describe the proposal for you and to find the standards that are relevant in that case. Let's see. Number 4, recusals and conflicts of interest. Anytime you have a personal or financial interest in the property that is being reviewed, consider whether or not you should recuse yourself. Number 5, manage expectations of the attendees. again, coming into a city commission like this for a presentation can be intimidating. So manage their expectations. Go over the agenda, or have a printed agenda. Go over the agenda at the start of the meeting. Talk about how the meeting is expected to go. Talk about rules for public comment, that sort of thing. Number 6, public comments. Public comments period at the beginning of each meeting. This is something that I tell HPCs to do it's a good thing to do if you want to do it and if you have the time to do it. And that just means have a agenda item at the beginning of your agenda. It doesn't have to be the first thing, but toward the front of your agenda that's called something like public comment on anything that's not on the agenda. That gives people an opportunity to come to the HPC and just talk about something that that may be of interest to the HPC. Feedback on the ordinance, feedback on this historic property or that historic property. You can limit them to 5 minutes, whatever. But it's just an opportunity. People rarely take advantage of it, so it's not like you'll be inviting 30 minutes of testimony at the beginning of each meeting. But have it there in case somebody is latching on to your ordinance and sees something that they want to comment on. Number 7, have a time limit for public comments. Most of the time it's 3 minutes. You probably have a time limit for yours. But on a controversial issue, people can go on, and you can have a meeting till midnight. So you want to avoid that. Number 8, follow an agenda. Have an agenda for your meetings. Follow them. Unless there's a compelling reason to bump an item up or down the agenda, keep on your agenda. Number 9, mine are different then. Put COAs at the top of the agenda. If you've got a bunch of internal business to talk about and you've got people waiting for their certificate of appropriateness, don't make them sit through all your boring half hour of other discussion. Bump them up to the front of the agenda so they can get through their presentation and get out of here. And finally, keep thorough minutes. Just record the details of your decisions. And if there's any critical conversation about one particular standard, record that there was some discussion about that. If you need to go, if a decision is appealed to the council, those minutes will be important to that appeal. Yeah. Some cities get a little itchy about that. They feel like they don't want to put too much in the minutes. That's really up to you and your chair. Who's your chair? Okay. So however you think about that is okay, but I'd say record as much of the decision and discussion as you can so that you can recreate it, the basic scale, the basic framework of the discussion.
Your item 6 through 11, it's a pretty standard format for all meetings,
Good.
whether it's HPC or Comment Council.
Excellent.
So.
Good. And then the last one, obviously you can approve with conditions, defer or deny. Any questions so far? Right. I got a clock right up here, so I usually I can do this in 2 hours. Is that okay? I hope. Did you block out 2 hours for that?
That's what we identified long before you were invited to the room.
All right. Good.
So.
All right, because it's a lot to go through, and I try to go fast. So, other things that an HPC can do, I get this question all the time. HPCs in cities that don't have a lot of local landmarks like you do, there are other things that an HPC can do. Educational projects. There's a continuing need for this. Have host tax credit workshops. Teach about local history whenever you have an opportunity. Partner with the local historical society. A big part of this is dispelling misconceptions. There are a lot of misconceptions out there about the National Register versus local designation. And you folks know it better than anyone. So look for opportunities to dispel those misconceptions. Historic markers and street signs. I think you guys have been doing a really good job of hitting historic markers.
And more to come this year.
Good. Excellent.
We're going to get markers in all 5 of the residential historic districts, explaining why
cool.
the district's historically significant. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, a project where we lost the federal funding a couple of years ago, we
Yep.
were able to revive this year
Oh, good.
using ARPA
ARPA money.
That's fantastic. I wish that you could use CLG money for that. We used to make grants for signage. The guidance that we've gotten from the Park Service recently says, no, we're not doing that anymore. So that's unfortunate, but I'm glad you're finding other funds to be able to do that. And you're way ahead of a lot of other cities in that regard. So nice job. Participate in local events where history is relevant. If you have local festivals or events where there's a history element to it, go and talk about those places and that history. Have a strategy, again, for designating properties on the National Register and local designation. Attend trainings. I hope you're able to get to a conference. We do a conference every year. The NAPC does a conference every other year. Hopefully you're members of NAPC. If you're not, I'd encourage you to do it. It's only $150 for a city commission membership. And NAPC has a lot of training and advising, and they publish a quarterly magazine that has really, really good stuff in it. They do have a lot of online, what do you call it? It's kind of training. It's kind of articles about this kind of issue or that kind of issue. So if you've got $150 in your HPC budget, that would be a good way to spend it. Solicit feedback on the ordinance and historic places from the public. Get a feel for how the public feels about these things. Identify projects for grant funding, which you've been doing a great job at. And contribute to the comprehensive plan process. I don't know if you have a historic preservation component to your comp plan. That's something that this body is really well positioned to contribute to. And that's the kind of thing that you can use CLG grant funding for. All right. Next section is another one of these critical sections. That's your designation criteria. And here, I'm sure I got this one right. This is not a leftover from the other. This is your. Okay, good. So this is your designation criteria. That's the criteria under which you can designate historic properties under your local ordinance. Any one of these. It doesn't have to meet all 5. It only needs to meet 1. And these are very common. I don't see anything here that is unusual. So these are very common throughout the state, throughout the country, actually. So I think I want to talk about, just run through some examples of each one of these. So briefly, number 1 is history. Number 2 is historic person. Number 3 gets at architectural style. Number 4 gets at a work of a master builder or architect. And number 5 is primarily used for archaeological sites. It says has yielded or may likely to yield information important to prehistory or history. That's most often used for archaeological sites. So I found some examples. Not all of these are in De Pere, but some of them are. For criterion 1, exemplify or reflect a broad cultural, political, economic, or social history of the state, nation, or community. And I thought the Mansion Hill Historic District was a good example of that. It's not architecturally wonderful, right? It doesn't meet that architectural criteria. It doesn't meet the master builder or designer criteria. It meets the history criteria. And what's the history associated with this district? It's World War II, the need for World War II worker housing. So this neighborhood, you know this well, this block of 14 houses was built specifically to meet that housing demand during World War II. they're not, here's a sample of one of these houses down in the corner. They're not big, beautiful buildings there, but they illustrate a period of American history that's really important. Criterion 2, associated with an important person. You don't have any National Register listed buildings in De Pere that are associated with a historic person, at least that I saw. I may be wrong. You don't think so?
I don't believe we do.
So I picked one that is in, I don't remember what county this is in. Hopefully you're all familiar with Aldo Leopold. He wrote a Sand County Almanac. So the little shack where he wrote a Sand County Almanac, which is an incredibly influential ecological text, the little shack where he wrote it is listed in the National Register for its association with him and the writing of that book. So criterion 3, embody a distinguishing characteristic of an architectural type or specimen inherently valuable for the study of a period, style, method of construction, or indigenous materials. This house was listed recently. It's the Agnes and Ruth Lenfesti Mark House on Ridgeway Boulevard. It was nominated because it's a really, really good example of what we call a contemporary style of architecture. Very popular in the 1950s and 60s, and this is just a really good example of that. So this was nominated under Criterion 3. Criterion 4, the representative of a notable work of a master, builder, designer, or architect. Again, I didn't find any in De Pere that were designated under that criterion, so I went over to Green Bay. So this is the Hotel Northland, as you all probably know. Nominated for as an important work of the master architect who designed it, Herbert Tulgren. And then finally, Criterion 5, have yielded or may likely to yield information about prehistory or history. I didn't see any archaeological sites listed in De Pere. This is one in my town, in Madison. It's an effigy mound that meets that criteria.
I don't think we have any.
So would that mean like,
I know.
like the location where we have like our Joliet marker on the shore of the Fox River, which is where the discovery of Wisconsin supposedly began, coming up 8 miles up the Fox River? That would be a criteria 5 if we were to designate that.
Right. If there's a site associated with that where there are ruins or artifacts or something.
I don't know if there's anything physically there other than the story kind of matches that as being the geographic location where they jumped off the boat in the river.
If that can be documented for the National Register, there has to be pretty irrefutable documentation that happened at that place.
Yeah, 'cause I think that's what the sign is. Our state historical marker sign is describing.
So that sign being there's probably some good documentation of that happening. So yeah, you could certainly designate that under criteria 5.
Okay. I mean, I'm just wanting to see if that's the kind of thing you're getting at.
Exactly.
I don't believe we have effigy mounds in this state very commonly. Unless we go over more towards the
Not too much up
nomination.
here. I mean, the northernmost mound that we know about is slightly north of here.
Yeah.
But I mean, around Lake Winnebago, of course, you're not right on Lake Winnebago, so.
High Cliff State Park has
Yeah,
mounds.
be the closest.
Oh, sure, the Fox River. I mean, anywhere there's a water body, there's going to be mounds. So yeah, there's probably some around the river on the shores of the river.
Excuse me, one quick question for Peter. Peter, that historic marker that you're referring to,
Yes.
is that the one at Voyager Park?
No, it's
No,
on
no,
Front
no, no.
Street.
It's the you know where the 102 is?
Yes.
That marker used to be underneath, well, what is now the 102. It was in that little park there where after the grocery store burned down.
Oh,
Then we were building the 102 and put that sign into storage and relocated it on the shore because it was put where the 102 was because it was believed that's as close as possible to where that site actually was. Now, whether it's 3 blocks up or 3 blocks down, different story. But that's why we put it where it is today because it was as close as possible as where we believe that story was being described on that sign.
okay.
This group did that probably 6 years ago, I think 5 or 6 years ago? Or was that while you were our chair?
I don't know. It was before my time.
Yeah, it must have been just before you became a member of HPC.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm taking time on
No,
you.
I think I'm ahead of schedule. Oops. All right, next critical component of a local ordinance is the designation process. So we talked about the criteria. The designation process is pretty straightforward. I didn't see a process defined, well, I did see a process defined in your ordinance. I didn't see a nomination process defined in your ordinance. So I don't, you may have a nomination process, a nomination form or something. Most cities have a form. But the first thing that happens during the nomination process is somebody or either a member of the public or someone on the commission submits a nomination form. And it's a formal nomination that provides justification based on the criteria. And the case needs to be made that it does meet that criteria. Consider who can submit that nomination. I think your ordinance says that the commission nominates.
Yep.
Yeah.
38.5. Mm-hmm.
So it's up to you on how you interpret that. But does that mean that a member of the public cannot nominate? Does that mean
They
nomination?
can ask to be nominated. What we do is they can ask to be nominated to this committee. They provide information to us to help make a decision on whether they're a qualified candidate. Oftentimes what happens is they'll come in, they'll make their request. We then send them back off to come back with that information. And then they'll come back one meeting or 2 meetings later with that valid information to
That works.
determine if they actually can be nominated.
Yeah.
In the background, then they're working with Kelly and I as staff to
Okay.
kind of, make sure they don't just come back with inadequate information again and again and again. They build it up with us and then present.
Okay. Got it.
And also HPC looks at the surveys that have been done and
good.
determines whether or not this property is worth
Yeah.
submitting for nomination.
Okay, good.
And if we don't have people that are knocking on the door, there actually is a subgroup of this committee that kind of goes out and listens for people who think they're interested or finds properties that may be good candidates and then consults with people who may want to be nominated. And they look for, was it 3 to 6 properties every year?
Yep.
Yeah.
Are the 4 that you have nominated, are they public buildings or, big prominent buildings that everybody agrees on?
Two are public buildings. One is a museum, one is Polo Resto.
Okay.
And then 2 are private residences, one of them being Jean's.
Okay.
The latest was.
Oh, right. I usually talk about that with cities who don't have any or want to start nominating some locally, is start with the low-hanging fruit. Your public library, your county courthouse if you have one. The big, beautiful, prominent buildings that may be public buildings that everybody loves and everybody agrees on, right? Start with those buildings, just to get people accustomed to what it means to be designated. All right. So nomination, notification. Obviously, you're going to notify the owner. I think your ordinance requires notification of owners within 100 feet. And your ordinance also requires notification of 7 other city agencies, which is a lot. And I've seen that before, notification of other city agencies. It's fairly common. 7 is a lot. It's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just haven't seen. It's very thorough. And published notification as required. Number 3, hold a public hearing. Obviously required by your ordinance and required by state law. So it's good that it's in your ordinance. And then designation. The HPC recommends designation to the council. And the council makes the final decision on whether or not to designate. And it's the same process for individual properties and historic districts.
Question for you, Jason.
Yeah.
We've been trying to increase the number of properties that are locally designated. It's been kind of an uphill slog at times because people concerned about the COA. Would you recommend always getting the buy-in from the property owner?
It's really tricky. You can't require it in your ordinance, but what a lot of cities end up doing is exactly what you're talking about, including my city in Madison. The council typically won't designate over the objection of the owner, even though they could legally, they could, and that has to be in your ordinance to be a CLG.
Yeah.
But in reality, in practice, the council typically doesn't, unless there's a really compelling reason to do so. So it's up to your council. It depends on who's on your council that year, and how they feel about preservation in general, how they feel about that building.
Yeah.
It's a complex
That
question.
was the lean of our council when we were going through the rewrite of this several years ago. Was that while you were?
I heard about it, but I think it was a
I think it
little
was just-
before
yeah,
my
just a little
time.
bit before you. That was the directive we were getting from our council, is they wanted that written in, and unfortunately, I had to tell the council, we can't write that
Yeah.
in. But that was kind of a directive we were given, was that they were not interested in approving over a property owner unless it's a extreme case scenario.
Yeah, that's the hang up that almost every city has. And I tell them, you have to have that tool in your toolbox, but how you use that tool is up to you. It's up to the commission, it's up to the council.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah, it does.
All right, your design standards. I have some examples that we can go through. You have really good design standards. They're in 38-5B 1 through 3, and they're kind of in 3 sections. It's in the powers and duties section of the commission. B tends to, it looks like it deals with demolition. So we have some good guidance on demolition. Number 2 are kind of general design criteria for you guys to use, HPC to use in reviewing proposed alterations that are pretty thorough. And then section 3 are the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. Those are federal standards that are, again, very general, but that are very good. And I'm glad to see that you incorporate them into your ordinance. You can incorporate them by reference, or you can put them in there verbatim like you do. That's fine. And it's good to see that because they're really good standards, and they augment what you already have in terms of general standards in section 2. I could do a week-long course on design standards. I'm not going to do that.
Are there communities that have a better version of these standards?
What's better? I mean, that's really hard to.
I find it challenging because I try to walk Joe Public through this, and like say they're interested in a designation, they kind of get lost in the weeds of the description because it's not like our zoning code. It shows you the text, and next to it is a picture, and then next to it is a table. So it tells the same story 3 ways.
Yep.
And here, it doesn't give us that. I don't disagree that they're good, but I think our general public sometimes gets lost in what it's telling them what they're going to have to do or what they can't do.
The best remedy for that is to develop a set of design guidelines. These are standards, right? They're legally, what's the word? They have to be followed. Design guidelines are an interpretation of your standards. You can use CLG funding to develop design guidelines. And design guidelines are exactly what you are envisioning with your zoning code. They have illustrations. I have a sample of design guidelines here. Somewhere here. The best remedy for that is to have a good set of design guidelines. Illustrating, with illustrations like this, showing what your design standards expect, what your design standards demand, what the HPC expects for additions or new siding or window replacement or, you know, pop tops on dormers. If you don't have a good set of design guidelines like this, I'd encourage you to get a grant and make a good set of design guidelines. There's a couple of consultants out there who do this. They're not, it's hard to, I'll be honest, it's hard to find a consultant who does it. There are a couple out there, one's in Chicago, one's in Minneapolis. There may be one, you may be able to find one in Wisconsin, but they're invaluable when it comes to the public interpreting your design standards. You're right, it's hard to know what you mean by these standards. If I'm just a homeowner coming in because I want to build a new porch, I don't want to read through 3 pages of design standards and try to interpret what you expect to see. That's not easy, especially for someone who's not used to dealing with these kind of codes. So design guidelines are invaluable for that. As far as good design standards or better design standards, it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish in your city. I'm not sure how to answer that.
Yeah, that's where even I, by the time I get to the end of one page,
Yeah.
I'm starting to get a little bit lost in what the beginning of the page was
Yeah.
telling me.
Yep.
Nevertheless, trying to convey that to somebody who's never even looked at
Sure.
this code before.
And I think one thing too that, and this may be hard to get across to property owners, but the easy way to do it is to look at your project. I want to build a new front porch. I have a small vestibule on the front of my house, right? And I want to build a front porch that goes all the way across the front of my house, not just this little vestibule. The easiest way to go about that is read through the standards and find out which ones apply to that project, right? So I'm looking at, let's just, and I have a couple of exercises in here that do that. So maybe we should back up and kind of look at some of those exercises. Let's do that.
Oh, I have too early.
Yeah, you got ahead of myself. So, all right, here's the first example. So say this project comes to you. It's a rear addition on a small bungalow. Small bungalow house. This is the back, or this is the front over here on the right. This is the rear. And what they're proposing is this addition, this new construction right here on the left. Can you see my, okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're proposing a little kind of mudroom addition on the back. Here it is straight on and in elevation view, and here it is from the other side. So this is on the back of this bungalow right here. So let's take a look at your standards and see which standards apply. First of all, it would require a certificate of appropriateness, right?
Yeah.
Under B1. If you're proposing to reconstruct, alter, or demolish. This is an alteration, so it requires a COA. Let's go to section 2. 2A, would it detrimentally change, destroy, or adversely affect the exterior architectural features? Well, anybody have some thoughts? It would destroy a little bit of the back. It would destroy probably, well, even these windows could probably be retained and probably would be retained. The siding, you may have to remove some siding to attach that that addition. So at the worst, you'd have some siding, some original siding removed, destroyed, detrimentally changed. Is that tolerable? That's your next question. Is that okay? From the street view over here, somebody walking down the street is not even going to see it,
Right.
right? Is that tolerable?
Yes.
Gene would vote yes.
I did it.
I was going to say, that looks like your house, Gene.
Yeah.
Is it your house?
No, it isn't.
It's the same color. That's why it looks alike.
So those are the kinds of questions you need to ask and decide on. And sometimes it's going to come down to a vote, and you might split on it. And then the chair would have to break the tie. Let's look at another one. This one will be pretty easy. So this is on the grounds of a church that is listed in. It's a local landmark, honestly, which is what we're talking about. This is in Madison. This is a little attendant booth that sits at the entrance to the parking lot. Right here is a historic house that's on the same property, again listed as a local landmark. They are proposing to demolish this attendant structure. Would that detrimentally change, destroy, or adversely affect an architectural feature? I'd vote no, because this is a relatively new utilitarian building that doesn't really have much to do with the historic house or the church.
Yeah, unless something in the shell of that original, unless something in the shell of what was being removed as part of the church that we didn't recognize in the past.
Yep. The demolition standard would come into play at B1. No owner shall construct, alter, or demolish. Oh, that's the certificate of appropriateness section. Sorry, there's another demolition. Oh, 2F has to do with demolition. And that just says that if an owner claims economic hardship or difficulty in order to get the demolition permit, that economic hardship cannot be self-created through failure to maintain the property. So that's not an issue. All right, let's look at another one. That one's pretty easy. Here's a dormer that the owner of this house wants to put on the rear face of the roof. Here's the house from the front. This is the front here, the porch. Here's the rear here. So this owner is proposing to pop up the top of the roof with a big dormer. Again, it's on the rear. Would it detrimentally change or destroy? We come back to that a lot. That's kind of the big overarching general standard. Will it detrimentally change or destroy historic features? In this case, it would destroy part of the roof. Is that a character-defining feature? Say it doesn't go all the way to the edges of the roof, to the roof line. It's just kind of in the center portion. The roof line here will be retained.
I think that's one of it's a depends question, because it's what kind of a roof are we destroying in the process?
Yep, good question. What if it has its original slate roof on it? Then the question becomes, well, what kind of roof are you putting on the new dormer, right? Would you make them salvage the slate and use it in the dormer, or match the slate of the rest of the roof on the dormer?
Yeah.
Right. Those are the kinds of questions that would come up in the meeting.
Does it also depend on why the structure was historically designated? So I'm thinking of the Mansion Street homes that are small. So people may want to put little additions on them.
Sure.
Does that take away the integrity of why that was a designated a space? So,
and again, it-
and it could, because the reason those homes were built the way they were was because of the period, and they were, they served a function for whatever.
Right, and they were built modestly for
Yeah.
workers who are working in defense-related industries in this area.
Yeah, so,
So their modestness of those houses is kind of important. So would you, what if someone comes in with a proposal to elongate that house? It's basically the same house, but
I
elongated.
can speak on that because I don't live on Manson Street, but I live in one of those houses.
Oh, cool.
And those houses are shaped like this.
Yep.
They're this long and they're this deep. And in the kitchen, so that I could actually have a modern-sized kitchen, I bumped the back wall out like that, so
Oh.
that my bathroom and my kitchen. So what was a gable roof is still a gable roof, but now there's a gable roof going this way,
Ah,
4 feet out.
and that's
That's
on-
exactly what you're talking about, right?
exactly.
Yep.
That is exactly what I did. Did I lose the ability to declare my house historic by doing that?
If it was in that historic district, I don't think so.
I purposely
Still
kept the
modest.
gable roof,
Yeah.
kept the siding the same.
Yep.
Just, the house is now 4 feet longer and the roof changes, so it's actually 2 gables going in 2 different directions.
Some cities' ordinances are explicit about that. They'll say, they'll kind of prioritize alterations. Like alterations to the front of the house are exposed to a high level of scrutiny. Alterations on the sides are exposed to a moderate level of scrutiny, and alterations on the back are exposed to a low level of scrutiny, and they'll make that explicit in the ordinance.
Do communities that do that high, medium, low, do they treat differently for corner lots or triple fronted lots?
Yes, yeah.
Does that
If it's a corner parcel and the house faces one street and the side faces another, that side elevation is treated as a main elevation, a primary elevation. So a corner house has 2 primary elevations.
And one of the additional items that I would look at is, with that addition to the house, is the same type of siding going to be used? The same type of windows be used to accommodate those architectural
Yep.
characteristics?
Doesn't that kind of what you just said, not to contradict you, but doesn't the state suggest like a don't try matching? When you do an addition,
The
a clear distinction
federal-
between new and old?
yes, the federal guideline. Well, here's a good example that's on the screen.
Oh, yeah.
The federal guidelines say, the federal standards are that if you're gonna build an addition to a historic building, pull it away from the historic building. Set it slightly off. Set it slightly back. Attach it with a hyphen like this. Attach it lightly to the historic, so that it's clear, so that you can clearly differentiate between the old and the new. So yes, that's a federal standard, and this is a good example of that. And so the standard in your ordinance that this one would address is, let's see. Oh, the standard one, does it destroy historic materials? Barely. This addition would barely destroy historic materials. You might have some holes drilled into the masonry. And 38.5.3I. And this is one of those federal standards. Remember, Section 3 has the 10 federal standards in it. And 3I says, was it undertaken in such a way that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property would be unimpaired? Would this project meet that standard? Anyone?
Yes.
I would think so.
I don't think so.
I would think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it touches the historic building very lightly.
Yeah.
So again, it's a matter of, looking at the project and then finding the standard that applies. And typically, it's only going to be 2, maybe 3 of these standards that apply in any given situation.
So Mark, white pillars, we'll be okay at white pillars, right? Since that can be enclosed in glass?
I'm expecting it
Okay.
to be.
Yeah, so they're redoing the museum, they're just keeping the front part of the building, and it's going to be enclosed in glass, but it's going to be the same.
This is the conversation I think you and I had a couple of years ago.
Probably. We've had a lot of
Yeah,
conversations.
we had a lot of conversations. That's why it might be familiar to you, but we haven't talked about it recently.
It's not coming to mind. I know white pillars.
Yeah, it's a locally designated, it's not state and
Okay.
national
Oh, that's right,
designated.
yeah.
So that's why we don't have to worry about losing a state and national designation. But it's a potential historic building that we could have state and nationally designated. But they're basically building a glass building over the top of it.
Oh, yeah.
And so the question arose that we were reaching out to you is if we were to seek that national status, could we still have it with a building inside a building?
Well, it's not the entire building, it's the front
Just the
part
front
of the
part,
building.
the historical part.
Yeah.
At the time, the part of the building was being removed and the rest was being
Right.
enclosed.
Oh, okay.
And that's how the question was posed at that time. 3 years ago, I think was.
And it's still the same.
that way.
Do you remember what I said?
I think the answer came, I think you said, geez, I don't know, let me go to Dinah.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah,
I think
that's a tricky
I think the
one.
question kind of came back going, we don't know on that one.
Yeah, that's.
Oh, but we didn't have
unusual.
drawings or anything to really lay on the table to say.
If you want an answer, if you're sincerely interested in getting it designated on the National Register, we can have that conversation with Dinah or whoever and
Yeah.
the National Register coordinator and see if it would meet the standards.
Yeah, because the concept is this old building that goes back to the 1800s, it's our oldest building,
1836, yeah.
Wow.
will be completely enclosed inside. It's a museum being enclosed inside a museum
Cool.
without moving it from its current location. It's not its original location today,
Yeah.
where it originally was, but without moving it again, just building.
We'll come in the back and then go.
Interesting treatment. Yeah, let's talk about it if you want to know more.
So yeah, that's why I think this whole concept of, is it an extension off the back
Yeah.
where it's being polite to the existing building? Well, no, it's not. It's an extension all the way around it.
Yeah.
So, and I think we were kind of, I knew my call to you was going to kind of stump you because it never was asked in that way.
And again, design guidelines, super helpful for you guys too, to have design guidelines for when these proposals come in and you're just not quite sure how to interpret it. Design guidelines are great for you guys to refer to as well, and really helpful for property owners designing alterations to their properties.
Do communities codify their guidelines?
Yes, occasionally. I don't know if that's a good
Codifying takes away
idea.
flexibility. sometimes.
Right, exactly. Yep. You want your standards to be flexible enough to allow buildings to learn and to evolve. Right? And if you codify design guidelines, that gets pretty prescriptive. So you can,
And that's where there's that balance between, do we codify so we can enforce it, or do we keep it a plan which isn't necessarily enforceable?
yeah.
That's,
But if you have design guidelines, they're not codified, and the HPC is using them to review projects, what's in your design guidelines is likely going to be enforced. Anyway, moving from, all right, another little couple more little exercises. So character defining features is something that design guidelines or that standards usually refer to. So when it asks things like, on the page, does it detrimentally change or destroy or adversely affect exterior features? So when we're thinking about alterations to historic properties, we're usually looking at the character defining features. What about this house defines its character as a relatively modest, compact Queen Anne house. Right? There are characteristics that define its Queen Anne-ness, and those are things like the curved porch, the relatively low, probably out of compliance railing, which is probably original railing, it's been grandfathered. The circular columns. Anything else? Anybody see? Its asymmetricalness. Queen Anne's are almost always asymmetrical. The complex roof line. This is a relatively small, modest Queen Anne. All the Palladian window here is pretty common in Queen Anne's. So all of those features, when somebody comes in and wants to make an alteration to this property, you're looking at those features. Do they want to, is this porch deteriorated and they want to take off this porch and make a square porch with a corner, and they would have to make a higher railing because they'd have to meet code, and square pillars, that wouldn't be conducive to the character defining features of this property. So you might ask them to look at repairing what's there, or if it is really deteriorated beyond repair, replace it with round pillars and these little dentils up above, or these are exposed rafters, I think. These little hash marks here. Make it, replace the rounded corner, and the rounded railing. This is a fun one. I like to do this one. I don't remember where this house is, but what if somebody, the owner of this house came in and got really tired of a flat roof and wanted to pitch the roof up, even a low pitch with a gable like right here, and on the garage section. Mm-hmm. How would you look on that?
I'd tell them they'll hate themselves.
Wouldn't be contemporary anymore.
Yeah, it's not much of a pitch they're talking about.
That's a really good point. But this house was designed with a flat roof. So to pitch up the roof to a point where you could see a gable here, I mean, you probably could, and I've seen this where somebody increases the height of this little, I don't know what you call it, fascia here, and makes a really, really low pitch roof, just enough for water to run off. And it still reads from the street as a flat roof. But to put on even a low or medium pitch roof here would utterly compromise the original design of the house. What about if somebody wanted a 2-car garage here and proposed extending this roof, keeping it flat, extending this out here, and putting in another garage door using the same brick, the same paint color, just an extended flat roof here. So you'd have, instead of 1 garage door, you'd have 2.
That should be okay, right?
That's doable.
That would be the one where you would look at it from the high, medium, low impact standpoint. Of, does it change the form, space, and balance of this house? It's a very small house.
It is.
And adding a second garage is really going to change the balance to that house. So even though it might look good using the same, a second 1-stall garage, columns the same size.
Yeah, it would help if you did just one door, though, instead of having 2 separate
Oh,
doors.
I see.
Just do
Yeah,
one
that's a good point.
garage, 2 stalls, but just one door. That would help diminish that a little bit.
Because in our zoning code now for modern house design, we have ratios of garages to houses.
Oh.
So clearly, when this house was designed, it was designed with a ratio in mind, just not conducive to the number of cars we own today.
Yeah.
And that's where that could change drastically by adding a larger second, a larger or a second door.
Really, really good discussion and good points being raised. And I don't have the right answer. There isn't a right answer. It's up to you and how you interpret your ordinance. This is just an image to illustrate how important materials can be in a design. You probably don't have a lot of that kind of stuff in De Pere. Again, method of construction can be important. This is a half timber. This is a genuine half timber building in Cedarburg. If you get a landmark building that is significant for its method of construction, and just be aware that the construction method can be what's important in the building. This was an interesting case that an HPC dealt with. The owner was proposing replacing the wood shingles on this gable and other gables. And the owner sent in this photo and said, see, these wood shingles are cupped and they're warped and they're at the end of their life, and I want to replace them with wood shingles with the same material. What do you think?
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, sure.
I would too. I think that's really reasonable. Yeah, and the HPC in that city let them do it. I think that's really reasonable, because you're gonna get bugs up in here, and it's just it's gonna let air in and probably moisture in. It's just not a really good situation. Oops. Here's another one. This one's in Madison, where the column, the base of this column, which was the same material as this over here, this sandstone, had weathered away to a point where it needed to be replaced. And so what they did, this was their solution, to build it up with a concrete. I would probably have suggested that they match the color of the sandstone.
I was going to ask, are they finished yet?
Yes, this is the finished product.
Okay. So
They obviously
weren't gonna
made.
stain the concrete to match.
Apparently not. Nope. They did here, though, right? I mean, this is obviously repaired, and they matched the color much better. They didn't match the texture very well, but here they just kind of called it in and didn't bother coloring the concrete. How about this one? Anybody know this building?
Which city or?
Where is it?
In Whitewater.
No.
Again, here, would this exterior treatment detrimentally change, destroy, or adversely affect exterior architectural features? Absolutely. You can see the Italianate window hoods that were above each one of these windows, the decorative window hoods, and the windows are completely gone. They're just plastered over. So yeah, this is a very obvious mistreatment of historic character.
That was very common in the 50s, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's,
50s and 60s and 70s.
I mean, we have that here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you would just apply
They covered that thing
a
up.
screen basically to an existing building, and that would be the exterior, then that screen. I'd like to show this in your ordinance does incorporate the federal standard that says that does not allow physical treatments that cause damage to historic materials. So on the left is original brick, and on the right is brick that was sandblasted. And obviously you can see that hardened patina on the exterior of the brick has been sandblasted off and exposing the center softer brick. So this sandblasted brick is going to deteriorate far faster than this brick. Same with wood. This is water blasted wood. It really takes out a lot of the material. Number 8, demolition. You address demolition well in your ordinance. It requires a COA. You require alterations to not detrimentally change, destroy, or adversely affect. Demolition is an alteration, so presumably you would evaluate demolition as an alteration. It must not be detrimental to the public interest. This is really interesting. Really interesting to see that language incorporated into an ordinance, is that it must not be detrimental to the public interest. Again, that gets at the state enabling legislation and the constitutionality. And then the owner may not claim economic hardship if the deteriorated state of the building is a result of failure to maintain it. I like to see that in an ordinance as well. We're doing great on time. Appeals. You probably know that there is a state statute. Where is that? There's a state statute that allows property owners that are affected by a decision that you make, any HPC decision that affects a property owner, that is appealable to the council. If you don't know that, remember that, because you have an appeals process in your ordinance anyway, so you're kind of covered. It's good to have an appeals process because the state statute does not define a process. All the state statute says is decisions of the HPC can be appealed to the council. That's it. Doesn't say what kind of decisions. It doesn't say how. It doesn't define a process at all. So local units of government can define that process for themselves, and your ordinance does that pretty well. Your appeals provision allows decisions of this body to be appealed to the council within 30 days. And then this is interesting. In a later section, 3811, so that was in 38.5, allows property owners to appeal within 30 days. And then back in 3811, there's another appeals provision that says any decision of the HPC may be appealed to the council. It has to be in writing and it's within 24 days, and the council may overturn with a simple majority. I suspect that was added about 5 years ago when the state appeals requirement came out, was adopted.
It was originally created in 2001.
2001, that section? 3811?
It says code 2001, and then it was modified in 2016.
2016. That was about the time that the state adopted this appeals language.
Yeah. So there was a version of it originally in 2001, and then this version
Okay.
would have been edited in 2016.
Okay.
But the 3811, the difference might be that this is 3811 is exclusively for the property owner. I couldn't appeal as a general resident. I'd have to be the property owner.
What about 38.5?
That's why I'm wondering if that's the difference. Is 38.5 any Joe Public, and then 3811 is property owner.
Interesting. Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Oh, 38.5 or the C, 38.5C is the applicant. So the applicant does not have to be the property owner in that case. That's the difference between
Okay.
the two.
Okay. Well, it's good that you have an appeals process defined. And it doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. And finally, penalties. That's the easy one. And you do have penalties defined in this ordinance. It looks like $200 per violation per day. And it's good to have a penalty in there. If there's no penalties, there's not really any incentive to obey the ordinance. So it's good to have penalties in there. Let's see. I think one more. I like to put this one in there too. Common missteps. And I haven't seen any of this in your HPC. It looks like it runs really well. You're lucky to have staff. Peter's great. Every time I've had to deal with Peter's been really knowledgeable and really great to deal with. So you're lucky to have staff. A lot of cities don't have planning staff to help them interpret the standards and just to guide them in using the ordinance. So you're fortunate to have Peter. I just like to go through some missteps that I see in other communities. Reviewing alterations to National Register listed properties. You guys don't do that, but you'd be surprised at how many cities do. And they're stepping in some questionable legal territory by doing that. And if they were to be sued by a property owner, they would certainly lose. So I'm glad you're not reviewing alterations to National Register properties. Not knowing or publishing the properties that are designated under your ordinance, you guys do that. A lot of CLGs and a lot of other cities don't do that. And I'm always encouraging them to do that. It's a really simple thing to put on your website. Reviewing paint colors. I'm glad you don't review paint colors. That just reinforces the stereotypical meddling that people think that HPCs do. They're just going to tell me what color to paint my house. So don't do that. Paint color is fungible, can be changed anytime, and it's not a character-defining feature. Using design guidelines created by the Main Street program. Is De Pere a Main Street community?
Yes, we are.
Okay, do they have design guidelines?
I
I
believe.
bet they do.
They do.
So in that case, if your Main Street is a Main Street community and a historic district, there's a potential for a lot of confusion in your property owners because they have design guidelines from Main Street, probably, a lot of Main Street communities do, which are not legally binding. And then they have the design standards in your ordinance. Wait, no, it's not a locally designated district, is it?
No,
It's not, okay. So
not locally.
never mind that. You don't have that problem. What becomes really confusing is when a commercial district, like your Main Street district, is designated under your local ordinance. So those design standards apply on your Main Street. Then you have the design guidelines that Main Street has, which are just guidelines, they're not binding. And then you have the design standards in your ordinance. And that gets really confusing for property owners. So you don't have that situation. If you ever designate your Main Street as a local district, beware of that confusion. Property owners will be very confused. Do you have a question, Gene?
No, I was just agreeing with you. Okay.
One of the things we did when we recently rewrote our zoning ordinance is we incorporated design guidelines that would have been separate in a local designation,
Oh, okay.
right into our zoning ordinance.
Oh, good.
So
Interesting.
we addressed spacing of doorways,
Good.
the amount of transparency in windows that you would see in your traditional old downtown.
Oh, good.
So it's not forcing people to build new buildings to look like old buildings,
Mm-hmm.
but it's forcing them to kind of replicate design concepts that fit new and old together.
Oh, good. That's a great way to do it.
So yeah, we're not telling an old person or not old person, an older building that it has to continue to be built to old.
Yeah.
But what it does is it encourages the new and the old to
Yep.
try to look
Speak the same language.
like they're designed
Yep. Good.
in the same way, just not in the same generation.
Cool. That's a good way to do it. Letting your HPC go fallow. That just means not meeting for a year or 2 years, and just your commissioners tend to forget that they're on the committee or on the commission, and they don't get a chance to practice to exercise their HPC muscles. So, and as a CLG, you're required to meet quarterly anyway, at least quarterly.
We
Which
called
you-
that COVID year, and then we were done.
No, yeah.
That was our fallow year.
That's pretty common. Merging your HPC with another reviewing body. I've had CLGs do this. I don't recommend it because you have a requirement to get that expertise that you need to administer your ordinance, to administer the HP ordinance. There's a CLG, I won't mention any names, but they merged their HPC with their plan commission. I think it was their plan commission. And on their plan commission, I mean, some of the HPC commissioners went over there, but the plan commission does a very, very different work than the HPC. Right? They're reviewing mostly new construction. They don't have a lot of experience with historic buildings or historic design standards. So it's not a great idea. It can be done, but it's not a great idea. Putting too much work on your HPC, if you don't have a lot of historic properties, so you don't have a heavy load of COAs already. But if you do if a city that does have a lot of historic properties has a significant workload, don't put a lot of other stuff on them and overwork them and burn them out. And losing the institutional memory. Looking at you, Gene. You know, losing those members who have been on the commission for a long time, if you have the time, you know, download that memory, get some of that institutional memory into the other commissioners before that commissioner cycles off.
To work
Gene's
on
not allowed to retire.
Good.
what's extremely valuable for me is to be able to work on certain projects with at least one other person,
Oh, yeah.
so that the procedure that I am familiar with is passed on to somebody else besides Peter.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
So that's all that I have. That's 2 hours of content in an hour and 40 minutes. So I did pretty good.
You did.
What questions do you have? What did I not get at?
Can you talk a little bit about like the tax credits?
Yeah.
My understanding is residential properties only qualify for state tax credits, where
Correct.
commercial gets state and federal. So one of the questions we sometimes get is, well, why can't the residential properties also get the federal tax credit?
It has to do with the way the tax credit program is structured.
Okay.
The federal program is exclusively aimed at commercial properties.
Okay.
That's just the way they wrote the law. That's just the way it is. And the state law is written specifically for residential for 25%, but there's also a commercial component in the state law that's 20%. So the state is written specifically for residential and commercial, but the federal program is just written for residential. Nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
I wish there was, but
Is there a map or a database resource that identifies properties that have tax credits that would be in jeopardy of being lost if they did certain things to their house? I at least weekly get a call from a realtor, sometimes more than once, when it's going up for sale when it's in a historic district, asking me if tax credits have been obtained and what that means to them.
oh, interesting.
And all I can do is send them to you and hope that they actually make that call.
Yeah. I think
Is there some place online that I'm not looking
No.
where I can actually look that up for people?
No, that's a database that we simply have not created and made public. Our tax credit reviewers are overworked as it is. We only have 2 of them for the whole state.
Yeah.
And each year we have about 700 projects for them to
Yeah,
review.
and that's where I'm afraid I'm slowing them down even more by sending multiple
No,
of the same
actually,
phone
no.
call to them.
That's a quick and easy question to answer. So send them to us. Absolutely. That's a 60 or 90-second question to answer. That's easy. They can just pull up the address on their computer and on their database and tell you whether there was a tax credit project.
Because I try to spend my 5 minutes here in De Pere to explain to them what it's all about so that they do make that quick phone call. And when they get that yes/no answer, they can hang up right away.
Oh, sure.
But it would be if there was a database,
Yeah.
I would just look at it for them.
Yeah, there's not,
Return that
unfortunately.
Oh, it's too
Yeah,
bad.
but feel free to send them to us. I mean, that's the best you can do is give them
Jason?
a contact and hope they call.
Just to continue that conversation, who at the State Historical Society should Peter recommend?
That was my next question.
Anyone in the SHPO, anyone in the State Historic Preservation Office.
Okay.
If you have my
Peter?
contact information, send them to me. I'll get them to I can just transfer them over to the tax credit. Anybody in our office of 20 people will be able to transfer them immediately to the tax credit reviewer.
It's good news. Yeah.
Yeah, call any one of us. Any phone number you can find on our SHPO pages on our website.
Hey, Jason,
Yeah.
earlier you mentioned different newsletters or things like that we could get either online or in the mail or whatever, keeping us up with what's going on. Could you recommend a few of those? Or
You mean for like training and issues?
I
and
think
things like
that's what we were talking
Yeah,
about.
what I was mentioning is the NAPC, the National Association of Preservation Commissions.
Oh, Okay.
Wisconsin has one too.
There's also a Wisconsin Association of HPC's Historic Preservation Commissions, WAHPC.
And Gene's got some of our stuff in their newsletter before.
Yeah.
Yes, Gene is on that board, and I
And you
attend their
serve as
meetings.
staff.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of the liaison with the SHPO.
I'm just not aware of any of those.
Sorry.
I'm just not aware of any
Oh,
of what's available.
yeah. Can we get WAPAC newsletter? Can we get these guys on the WAPAC newsletter?
I get it, but
You get it.
Because
Okay,
WAPAC
but-
puts out a really good newsletter.
I think they
every
just didn't
quarter.
update it with the new commissioners yet with their emails.
Yeah.
I think one of the keys is to make sure that I would have available to me all of your email addresses. And then I would get that to the Secretary of WAPAC, and you'd be in the, on the roll.
Yeah, that's a good newsletter. And also, NAPC has
NAPC.
all kinds of issues, papers, and their quarterly magazine goes back decades. There's a lot of really good articles in there. They do webinars. NAPC does a webinar every month. That's really good for
Virtual.
commissioners.
Right.
When I registered us this year again, I put in all of our email,
Oh, good.
because it asked what all of our emails were.
So are you?
I put it in, so I'm assuming that they're emailing not just me now, they'll begin emailing all of you.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Yeah, NAPC, if you're on the NAPC list, you should be getting an email once every couple of weeks.
Yeah, right.
Oh.
As a member of the WAPAC board, I'm a member and I get that info.
Okay.
I could forward it to you if you would like.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, if you're a member and you have login credentials, you should have login credentials.
Oh,
You can log into the website and get access to even more.
yeah.
All of their back issues of their magazine. That's the richest source of preservation commissioner training and advice and information that is out there.
So Jason, one of the projects we're working on this year, well, we haven't yet, but later this year, we have a couple of property owners. They've never been surveyed in like the 2017 or 2001 survey. So we are going to maybe try to help them get an initial sense of if they're even qualified. And I know there's kind of a long process for them to submit it, like to you guys. Have you seen other HPCs in the state help property owners with that application process if they haven't been surveyed yet?
Yes, and there's there's a way to get a quick initial determination on whether or not they're eligible. They don't have to fill out a whole nomination form, which is a lot. It's a really dense, highly researched document. Before they get to that point, there's a form. It's basically a short form for an initial determination. It's called the National Register Questionnaire. It's on our website. If you just do a search for National Register Questionnaire and Wisconsin, it'll be the first hit. That's a short form that anybody can fill out with information about the building, why you think it's historically important. Send that in to us with some photos of your property, and we'll give you an initial determination in about 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause I think that's exactly what you're asking.
Yeah.
Because we found that it was like in a matter of a month, like 3 different properties asked us, and we opened up our surveys, and it was all 3 of them weren't listed.
Oh.
And so we told those 3 property owners about that, and
Yep.
it was pretty clear that 2 of them just probably weren't going to do anything, and that's where this group kind of had that idea. Well, can we submit on their behalf, or is it actually?
Yeah, you actually can. Anybody can submit that. It's not binding, and it's just an initial. What happens is that form comes into our office. We have a committee that meets once a week, called the Resource Evaluation Committee.
Okay.
And we look at the property and the information that the submitter sent, look at the photos. And these are people who know historic properties and whether they're eligible and how they're eligible. So based on that information, we make an initial determination of whether it's potentially eligible or not. And we'll tell you, yeah, your property, this looks potentially eligible. A full nomination would likely be successful, or it wouldn't be successful.
Yeah, for one property, that's exactly what we needed, because it's a building that the first floor is a bar. The brick has been painted over. A couple of structural things have been added to the facade. I'm not quite sure if the front door looks exactly like it used to. And so it was enough that we were kind of like, do we waste our $2,000 request for a grant only to be told no?
Oh, yeah.
Or do we just go ahead and ask even without the
Well,
knowing?
in a case like that, before, you mean a CLG grant?
Yeah, like asking for, we didn't want to waste the CLG dollars on it to have you say, well, no, that doesn't
I wouldn't
qualify.
let you, honestly. I wouldn't give you a grant unless we have that determination of eligibility. So if you asked for a grant for that and we hadn't looked at it and it wasn't in a survey, I would say, let's just look at this and make sure it's eligible first before we do a grant for that.
Yeah, and I think that's the number one thing like Jonathan's getting at is so that we don't invest a lot of time in a grant
Sure, yeah.
application.
Yep. And that's a great thing for the HPC to be doing. An HPC that doesn't have a lot of local landmarks, a lot of COAs, is help people who are interested, if they're interested in tax credits and they think their property might be eligible, absolutely help them, guide them to us and that National Register questionnaire, and they can have an answer in a couple of weeks.
Okay, good.
There's no cost, it's not binding.
Jason, one of the criteria for listing as a historic property was this building associated with an important person? Okay. When you qualify important person, does that have to go beyond local?
No,
It does not.
no, it could be an important person in the city of De Pere. A mayor who made some policy change that changed the direction of the city, or who knows? It could be, but it only has
Or
to
a
be important
financial-
locally.
A financial donor
Sure.
to major
Yep.
projects.
Yep. Somebody who developed a program that, helped disabled kids, year after year, and it became a big thing, helping hundreds of kids.
Okay,
Shane is,
that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It can be an important person in the city, in the state, or the country.
Okay,
So yeah, definitely a locally historic person is eligible.
excellent. We'll pursue that.
Anything else?
Really appreciate
yes,
your
thank you,
efforts.
Jason, that was
and
great.
You're welcome. I like doing this. Anytime, and if I can focus on one particular thing and come back and do it again, definitely let me know. Y'all have
I
a
guess
more
we'll go
agenda?
back to the dais.
Yeah, we have one more agenda item because it has to do with our CLG grant.
Yeah, actually, it's related to you guys, so.
Yeah, because we meet bi-monthly now, we have to
That'd be interesting.
reluctantly.
Arthur Altmeier's house.
Yeah.
Where was his house?
I don't know.
Stephen King, yeah. Yeah, but no, like about a year, maybe 2 years. Enough to
Weren't
witness
the
that, the deadly scene.
Weren't the major donors to the pavilion? Okay.
I can't say that.
Their house is on
Where Kelly is, sit up here.
Hickory Street. I'll do some follow-up on that.
We should check
Thanks,
with
Jason. See you soon.
Dan Milkwood might know
Know what?
where Arthur Altmeier's house was, his homestead.
I'm sure he probably does.
Yeah, I mean, because he went to Pier, so it had to be on the east side, because he went east to Pier in the 30s.
What? Yeah. I have a paper in there in the front, so don't.
Oh, yeah.
All right. We'll go to item 5. Consideration and possible action regarding a memorandum of agreement, scope of work, and template for consultant contract for funding up to $6,000 from the Federal Historic Preservation Fund through a subgrant from the Wisconsin State Historic Preservation Office to the City of De Pere, Wisconsin, to nominate the State Bank of De Pere at 127 North Broadway Street to the State and National Registers of Historic Places, Parcel ED-768. Peter?
Thank you. Within your packet, I put 3 documents. One is the Memorandum of Agreement and these standard operations for the project. And along with that, I also put a draft of an RFP request for a consultant. At tonight's meeting, I'm asking you to review and approve the Memorandum of Agreement and the standard operations so that we can pass it on to council for their consideration, which will then allow us to sign this and pass it back to the state to get this grant rolling.
Before I make a motion to approve, one editorial on packet page 20 at the very top, project area background. It's written, the 3 residences are in the City of De Pere. That's incorrect.
Yeah, this is a draft of the RFP. This is not the document that you are approving tonight. I only included this because so that you would be familiar with the model that we're using. That's purely a typo on my part in creating the draft for you.
Okay.
So that, but it just so it's clear, the draft request for proposal is not a document that you are considering tonight for approval.
Okay. I make a motion to approve.
Second.
We got a motion by Jean, seconded by, I think it was Jane. Yeah. To approve. Any further discussion, comments? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And open to a motion to adjourn.
Oh, go ahead. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, motion by Patrick, seconded by Mark to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.